Start the second session. I'll appreciate if you can take your seats. Both. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. We'll start our second session on the urbanism and the past, and I'm pleased to introduce two presenters with wonderful two papers. The third presenter hopefully will come on time to give the presentation. She had to be on the first session, but because some problems with transportation, she's not here yet. So Tom went to pick her up, and we hope that she will come on time. In the meantime, we'll start with Wendy Redfield, and she's an Associate Dean for Academics and favorite Associate Professor of Architecture at Tulane University in New Orleans. Previously, she taught at North Carolina State University, serving as Associate Director of the School of Architecture and Director of Graduate Program from 2005 to 2008. She received a Bachelor of Architecture, a BA, from Brandon College, Columbia University in 1985, and a Master of Architecture from the University of Virginia in 1990. Wendy's scholarship focuses on architectural site and urban issues and on cultural aspect of architecture. Wendy is a registered architect who continues to practice through university-affiliated community outreach and engagement. She currently is engaged in the production of a documentary film focusing on water, architecture, and spiritual ritual. And this is part of her paper. Thank you. Please welcome her.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's the first time I've talked about this work publicly, so bear with me a little bit. I'm going to start with a quote. Wherever a step well links brilliant Indian sun to a clear pool of water, two separate worlds are joined. In the well's stone corridors, people move between one realm and the other. The diminishing light descending the stairs conveys a sense of passage, deep into the earth, moving further into darkness. Excavation is balanced with construction, one pair of opposites, in a series that includes sky and water, solid and liquid, empty and full. The experience is mesmerizing. Indeed it is. I had the opportunity to visit the stepwells, a number of them for the first time last summer. I harvested some video footage. I hope to share a few brief clips of that with you at the end of my paper if I have time. But in the meanwhile, I wanted to say a word or two about what got me interested in all of this. So two seemingly unrelated things happened around 2008, 2009. The first was that I became aware of the stepwells, primarily through my colleague at the time, Paul Tazar, and Kristen Schaefer. Paul was able to visit them with another colleague at NC State, and then Kristen became extremely enthusiastic, and we all started talking about our shared enthusiasm for these things and wondering why we had never heard about them, although we all considered ourselves fairly knowledgeable, well-educated in architectural history, etc. The other thing that happened was that we had this big economic downturn that some of you might remember. And in December of 2008, Barack Obama coined the phrase shovel-ready project to indicate projects that fairly rapidly could be implemented, sometimes acts of large construction of large infrastructure that could put unemployed laborers to work almost immediately. Now, while I politically supported these types of projects and these ideas, this term shovel-ready project irked me because it implied that these projects of major import and longevity, presumably, to our physical environment could be commenced almost immediately with almost no forethought, design, reverence, or imagination. So this is the context within which I started to ponder these questions and issues in the potential relationship of infrastructure to culture and spirituality. I'm going to switch to this. In the past, globally, communities expressed great civic pride in providing clean water to be gathered for drinking, bathing, and laundering. The impressive network of Roman aqueducts and fountains, for example, used architecture's full powers to ennoble, enrich, and celebrate these basic human activities and the systems making them possible. They exceeded mere utility to express joyful gratitude and imperial grandeur, and as interpreted by Federico Fellini, even a bit of glamour and sexiness. Many municipal reservoirs of the 19th and 20th centuries in European and American cities, similarly, were places that not only accommodated infrastructural and utilitarian needs of supplying vast amounts of clean water to large urban areas, but some, such as Manhattan's Croton Distributing Reservoir, pictured here, became significant places for public promenade and social interaction. This is an image at the Easter Parade, parading by the Croton Reservoir, which was demolished soon thereafter at the end of the 19th century and replaced with New York Public Library. But prior to that, it was conceived, again, not only as a piece of public infrastructure to bring water to the city, but as a kind of promenade ground and park. People would parade along the edges of this thing, as is shown in this Currier and Ives print. Equally impressive, but far less well known, the stepwells of Rajasthan and Gujarat in Western India stand as witness to a time when water and its architectural elaboration were inextricably intertwined with the social and spiritual lives of communities. These well cisterns provided Indian villages with water for drinking and bathing, laundering, social gathering, and worship. They exemplify a system of infrastructure that epitomizes a sustainable harvesting of natural resources, also imbued with cultural and spiritual significance. As one approaches most stepwells, they are hidden from view. There is a very major aha factor as you approach these things, because you don't see them coming, and then all of a sudden there is this gaping and usually very elaborately designed and carved void before you. These well structures are carved between 3 and 9 stories into the ground, creating subterranean platforms and pavilions that are covered and providing shade. One descends into their depths, experiencing their cool, shaded mystery within the body of the earth. They don't exist, as most buildings do, as objects, but only as space. They are inextricably linked to the earth, its mysteries, its depth. They are located primarily in remote villages in the arid regions of Rajasthan and Gujarat, well away from heavily trafficked tourism centers, and herein perhaps lies the reason for their relative obscurity and strange absence, in large part, from the literature covering the canon of world architecture. The scholarship on the stepwells and stepped ponds of this region is also sparse. The primary text in English, and the one to which this paper is most heavily indebted, is Morna Livingston's Steps to Water, The Ancient Stepwells of India, which I recommend to everyone. Also important sources are Jutta J. Neubauer's Stepwells of Gujarat and Kiri Tumenkodi's The Queen's Stepwell at Patan. If you don't speak or read Sanskrit or Hindi, you have very few options to learn about the stepwells unless you go yourself. Many of my observations in this paper are informed by these sources, but also by my firsthand experience there and my discussions with villagers and locals that I met while in India. Stepwells are stone-lined structures carved into the earth. Hundreds of these wells still dot the towns and villages of Rajasthan and Gujarat. About 3,000 were built originally, and around Delhi. The climate in these regions is hot and arid, with a few months of monsoon rains. To gain access to water during the rest of the dry year, the people of the region use stepwells to collect and hold water. In addition to acting as cisterns that hold water from the rains, the wells were dug deep enough to reach the natural aquifer on average 9 stories below the Earth's surface. Additionally, some of the wells tapped into underground natural springs. Following the end of the monsoon rains, in the fall, the step wells were filled with water almost to their topmost tier. I visited pretty much at the end of the season, right before the monsoon rain started, so that was by design, so that I could get into and see most of them. During the course of the year, as the water table dropped, step terraces of cool stone quarried from nearby sources allowed villagers to descend deeper and deeper into the earth sufficiently to gain access to the water. By the time of the rain cycle just preceding the monsoons, the driest time of the year, villagers seeking water would need to descend up to 9 stories into the earth. At this time, the majority of the structure is finally visible and inhabitable. The various levels of the well, often festooned with spectacular architectural niches, altars, platforms, columns, corridors, and ornamentation previously submerged under the water, are now fully revealed to view. Various types of steps and ramps, as well as pulley systems, allowed for different means of access to the water and its transportation back to the surface. At given intervals, platform areas stabilize the slope of the packed earth behind the stone and also provide visitors a place of rest and opportunities to gather. These are partially covered shaded areas within these platforms, often containing small temples or altars to various gods and goddesses related to the religious customs or specific gods of the local village, temple, or the patron of the well. The religious affiliation and related ornament is unique to each well and the region generally, and as such reflects and serves as memorial to centuries-old customs of living, ritual, and worship. First and foremost, however, wells were, of course, utilitarian. They linked people to water in a region where this was not easy to do. They were created out of necessity, but their engineering and architecture enabled a harmonious and quite ingenious integration of the climactically extreme realities of this geographic region, the needs of local peoples, and the cultural and religious beliefs and practices these communities espoused. The increasing scarcity of water in northwestern India today and ongoing cultural associations and religious beliefs cause many of the step wells to continue to be used. Unfortunately, they are not uniformly preserved and are therefore currently underutilized, both as the environmental and cultural resources they still are and could be. The wells are, by their very nature and design, urban gathering spaces. They were designed for the community as gifts to villages from wealthy families or rulers, often by women or queens, as water was associated with the feminine. The step wells were a center of social life for centuries for men, but particularly for women, who were generally responsible for laundering and hauling water from the well to the home. The wells were the sole place, in fact, that women could acceptably gather to socialize outside the home without the accompaniment of their husbands or mothers-in-law. It is part of Hindu doctrine that adherents bathe daily, believing that clean thoughts come from physical cleansing. The wells, as places for bathing, are part of a larger belief system that also includes India's 7 sacred rivers. Indeed, as Morna Livingston in her book relates, it is common for Hindus to pray upon entering the water. While water and places for bathing all hold a degree of spiritual significance, it is important to distinguish here between stepped ponds, such as Surya Kund, which you've seen here at Madeira, always adjacent to temples, that are fully open to the sky, rectangular or square-shaped, and the step wells, typically located further away from the temples, that are long and thin, partially covered by various terraces and pavilions, and considered, generally speaking, more secular. Step ponds next to temples were strictly used for bathing and religious ritual. More profane uses of wells, such as watering of animals and laundering, took place only in the step wells, which nonetheless were lined with altars and used as daily places of prayer and worship. Both stepped ponds and step wells, however, were considered tirthas. I hope that's the proper pronunciation. A term which connotes the threshold between earth and heaven, but also translates as watering hole. Tirthas were pilgrimage destinations and were thought to be interconnected into one integrated realm that included all rivers, temples, step wells, and pilgrimage sites. In addition to daily prayers and bathing rituals, step wells were also sites of religious festivals and ceremonies. On my visit to the Panamia step well, I encountered a villager who urged me, this was in mid-July, urged me to come back in a month. Of course, I was getting on a plane in 4 days, unfortunately, to be at the Panamia step well for the celebration of the birth of Krishna, because apparently it is a very big deal, and the wells just become filled with people singing and dancing and celebrating. So clearly, although some of the wells are no longer functioning as wells, they very much still function in their original symbolic and cultural ways in many of the different locations. Milo Beach, who wrote a foreword to Morna Livingston's book, said that, noted that as distinctive as these buildings are, they are also among the least known or visited monuments in India. And I found that to be true visiting them. There were usually not a lot of people there, and most of the tourists were Indian, not American or European. When the British came into India in the 19th century, they decommissioned most of the wells, literally placing locked grates over them to prevent access, and replaced them with a piped water supply. They were apparently, by European standards, horrified by what they saw as the unsanitary conditions. According to the Archaeological Survey of India, Henry Cousins of that organization at the time reported on seeing the stepwell at Vadvan, saying that, quote, the water in it was foul beyond description and the stench within was very great, yet people go there and bathe and wash their clothes, end quote. Though many of the wells have disappeared or are in various states of ruin, there are a number that are virtually intact, open for visitation, and capable of being preserved as cultural and ecological resources. Large and particularly ornate wells, such as the Queen's Stepwell at Patan, Rani Ki Vav, and Adalaj near Ahmedabad, are supervised and subject to ongoing efforts of preservation and conservation by the Archaeological Survey of India. However, the vast majority of more minor stepwells continue to be pillaged for stone or ornament, or used as dumping places for garbage, and generally allowed to continually degrade. There have been recent signs that the collective value of the wells to serve as cisterns in urban areas, particularly around Delhi, is being used to champion their preservation and rehabilitation. In a 2002 article in the Times of India, a former director of the Archaeological Survey of India was quoted as saying, quote, these ancient structures hold the key to solving today's water crisis. If the rain is properly harnessed, there should be no problem here. This is an active stepwell that was rehabilitated in the heart of Delhi. We had a very hard time finding it. It is embedded in the middle of a block, and at the time it was being used as a very refreshing swimming pool for the local youth. Since this time, numerous stepwells in and around Delhi and some in Jaipur have been cleaned and rehabilitated so that they can once again become sources of sustainable and clean water for the local community and serve as well as places of cultural significance and social gathering. However, it is unclear whether these efforts that are most prevalent in Delhi will spread to the more rural areas of Rajasthan and Gujarat. For, as was observed in Morna Livingston's book, preservation is a luxury allowed to a culture secure in its achievements without a critical mass of unmet public needs. In conclusion, the stepwells of India embody a wealth of inspirational lessons regarding Indian cultural history and display the many ways that architecture is capable of enabling and honoring the relationship between precious natural resources and human life. It is tempting to think about ways that contemporary societies can learn from and implement these elegant strategies for sustainably harnessing natural resources in ways that contribute to the cultural and social vitality of communities. While it is unlikely to imagine public wells such as these replacing municipal piped water supply to homes and other buildings. In American cities, it is not so far-fetched to imagine other analogous intersections of infrastructural imperative and social purpose. In New Orleans, for example, we are quite literally awash in numerous conversations and proposals concerning water management. After a century of resisting our low-lying adjacency to bayous, swamps, and easily flooded terrain by force of engineering, levees, storm drainage systems, pumping stations, and the like, many of the more enlightened proposals currently being discussed contemplate making place in the urban terrain for flooded and floodable areas. These areas of water retention to relieve the damaging cycle of flood mitigation through pumping, land subsidence, and an ever-shrinking ground can in turn be imagined as amenities to citizens as parks, community gardens, and natural preserves. Other cities and places might spawn other place, climate, and environmentally specific intersections of utility and delight. Perhaps a more widespread knowledge of the stepwells, among other great examples, might spur us to remember the not too distant past when art and culture were seen as integral and essential components of all mediations between ourselves and our environments, rather than as superfluous overlays of style or ornamentation on a select few monuments. So I'm gonna, if I have 2 minutes left,
2 minutes.
I'm gonna show you a brief clip that is just a bit of a collage of some of the stepwell. Why did it go away? Oh, good, it's back. My research assistants. This is the Sun Temple at Modera and the Suryakund stepwell right next to it. This is the Panamina stepwell in Jaipur. That's it.
Very nice.
Thank you.
change the computer? Can you change the computer? Can you change the computer?
I think, did you not put your thing on here? Is that not it? Okay. This is right. Yep.
While they are changing the computers, I want to thank Wendy, and I would want to introduce our second speaker, which is Kristen Schaffer. She teaches architecture and urban history in the School of Architecture and College of Design at North Carolina State University. Her research focuses on Daniel Burnham and the Plan of Chicago. Part of it you will hear today. Her work brought to light the contents of Burnham's manuscript draft and argued for its significance in interpreting the published document and understanding of Burnham's inclusive view of planning. She earned her Master of Architecture and PhD at Cornell and previously taught at Syracuse University. Please welcome Kristen.
Thank you.
This is my clock.
Oh, that's yours. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. The architect and city planner Daniel Hudson Burnham is best known for his work with his early partner John W. Root on the development of the Tall Office Building, for his work on the World's Columbian Exhibition of 1893, and for his city planning projects, especially his 1909 Plan of Chicago. This paper will focus on the Plan of Chicago and its relation to Burnham's Swedenborgian religious beliefs. Emanuel Swedenborg was an 18th century Swedish Lutheran scientist and mystic. He was called the Buddha of the North by D.T. Suzuki and by others the Leonardo da Vinci of his era. Although most people know little or nothing of Swedenborg today, he was well known in his own day and throughout the 19th century. His ideas influenced American artists Hiram Powers and George Inness, and John W. Root and Louis Sullivan, as well as Burnham. Swedenborg's early studies included chemistry and physics, mines and canals. His later investigations, however, were more esoteric as he sought the nature and location of the soul in the human body. Swedenborg believed that the physical form of the body originated in the soul. This idea of the spiritual origin giving form to the physical is an important theme in Swedenborg's writings and in this paper. His inquiries led to a spiritual reawakening and to subsequent mystical revelations that convinced him that all existing Christian churches were dead and in need of revitalization. Swedenborg believed that he delivered a message from God for a new interpretation of Scripture. This hermeneutical emphasis influenced Burnham's interpretation of his own professional work. Based on Swedenborg's extensive writings, his followers founded the Church of the New Jerusalem. Note the name, the New Jerusalem, the heavenly city of the second coming described in the book of Revelation. Let's recall Louis Sullivan's description of Burnham. Louis found Burnham a sentimentalist, a dreamer, a man of fixed determination and strong will, no doubt about that, a large, wholesome, effective presence, a shade pompous, a mystic, a Swedenborgian, a man who readily opened his heart if one were sympathetic. He liked men of heart as well as brains. He averred that romance need not die out, that there must still be joy to the soul in doing big things in a big personal way, devoid of the sordid. Yet it is also Sullivan who reminds us of the other side of Burnham, of the architect who, from the outset of his career, strove for big projects in emulation of the large business corporation. Sullivan observed that the only architect in Chicago to catch the significance of this movement was Daniel Burnham, for in its tendencies toward bigness, organization, delegation, and intense commercialism, he sensed the reciprocal workings of his own mind. The Burnham who emerges here is both practical and sentimental, shrewd and spiritual, a doer and a dreamer together, or as one colleague put it, Burnham was a visionary with sound business judgment. This duality is not unlike Swedenborg's own in Minds, Canals, Chemistry, and Physics, and mysticism. Swedenborgianism was the religion of Burnham's childhood. He thought of entering the ministry, but found his calling instead in architecture. In letters to his mother as a young man, Burnham verbalized the connection between his religion and his newly chosen profession. He described architecture as the striving after the beautiful and useful laws God has created to govern his material universe. He believed that his professional calling would open my mind more and more to the great architect of the universe. Burnham's commitment to his religious beliefs continued throughout his life. Some 40 years after the letters to his mother, we have evidence of this in the words of Burnham's protege, Edward H. Bennett. Bennett was co-author of The Plan of Chicago and worked closely with Burnham on the design of neighborhood park field houses. Bennett recalled that Burnham thought men were at their best when they channeled some higher force. He described Burnham as a blazing human spirit of pure gold who flooded my life with its warmth and inspiring faith for years. Bennett noted after a visit to a then hospitalized Burnham that we talked of Swedenborg, or rather I listened to him discourse on the subject and came away strengthened in purpose. To understand how Burnham's religious beliefs relate to his planning activities, two of Swedenborg's important concepts must be introduced: correspondence and uses. Swedenborg believed there was a correspondence, a meaningful connection between the various planes of being, that everything outward and visible has an inward and spiritual cause. He wrote, "The whole natural world corresponds to the spiritual world. It must be understood that the natural world springs from and has permanent existence from the spiritual world, precisely like an effect from its affecting cause. For example, both the spiritual and material realms have a sun at the center. The Lord is the sun in the spiritual world, radiating heat that is divine love and light that is divine wisdom. This corresponds to the sun in our natural world, whose emanations are merely physical." In the spiritual realm, Swedenborg identified three heavens: the innermost and most perfect, an intermediate, and an outermost. Beyond the outermost heaven is the world of spirits, and beyond that is hell with its three divisions. Please note the concentric configuration of that description. When the natural world corresponds to the divine order of the spiritual, it is able to manifest goodness. For Swedenborgians, the goal was to produce the highest, most noble representations of the spiritual that would elevate, refine, and purify the mind. According to Bennett, the laws of spiritual correspondence were often in Burnham's mind. Burnham wrote a sermon on the court of honor of the fair, explaining the correspondence of its design to the verses from the Revelation to John chapter 4. And Bennett recalled while they were working on the plan for San Francisco, he had seen Burnham trace the correspondence of spiritual powers and municipal powers as indicated in the physical layout. According to Bennett, Burnham believed in the infinite possibilities of the material expression of the spiritual, and that consciously or unconsciously, no great work can have been conceived without a sense of an underlying spiritual meaning. Now, on the right here is a redrawing of Eugene Eynard's diagram of Paris. And this is a redrawing that Burnham had done and is included in the Plan of Chicago. And we'll get back to Eynard in a minute. This is the Plan of Chicago, and north in this case is to the right. In the Plan of Chicago, we can expect to find a similar correspondence. the scholar Irving Fisher has argued that the divine order of heaven is represented in the plans of the city. Fisher developed his own diagrams to posit the limits of heaven, and these are Fisher's diagrams from his article. While I agree with the basic supposition, I disagree with the diagrams. Given the scale at which Burnham liked to work, and since Burnham himself offers what I would argue is his own diagram in the plan of Chicago, I see no need to create an alternative. So this is Fisher's inner, intermediate, and outer heavens, and then in another article he combines them here. This is a little harder to see, but we have them here in one diagram. In the plan of Chicago, we see evidence that Burnham was looking for this divine configuration in history in the plans of some cities. Burnham used the diagrams of urbanist Eugene Eynard to illustrate this in the plan of Chicago. Especially in Paris, with its concentric rings, we see a conformation closely resembling Swedenborg's description of heaven. Burnham remarks in the plan, and these are his words, the universal mind recognizes in Paris that complete articulation which satisfies the craving for good order and symmetry in every part. Shortly after these Eynard diagrams in the plan of Chicago is this plate depicting the concentric configuration with encircling roots and color variation emphasizing the different territories. This plan, I would argue, represents not only the correspondence of the plan of Chicago, the concordance of the plan of Chicago with that of Paris, but also the correspondence of the new Chicago with the three heavens of Swedenborg's descriptions. And in the plan and elsewhere, in the plan and elsewhere, I can find no other reason for the color variation in this plan, and it's the only one like it, and it immediately succeeds the Eynard diagrams. This is the inscription of divine order on Chicago. And when I say the scale at which Burnham liked to work, we see here his plan for the park systems. So we had been looking at just this area, and you can see how he continues the concentricity here, and then now orienting north to the top in the surrounding roads of the city. So that's correspondences. Uses. For Swedenborgians, uses is one's contribution to community. Uses could be the pursuit of one's work or career as long as the focus was not on individual gain. To be in uses through one's work, one would have to, and this comes from a little card that Burnham's wife carried around with her, one would have to discharge with fidelity the functions of one's employment and the duties of one's office, and to make oneself in all things useful to society. Swedenborg wrote, by uses not only the necessities of life are meant, but also the good of one's country, community, and fellow citizens. Business is such a good when it is the end love, and money is immediate subservient love, and when the businessman shuns and is adverse to fraud and bad practices. Swedenborg did not discourage success, but success had to be pursued in the right frame of mind, balanced by a sense of duty to community and neighbor. For Swedenborgians, all elements of faith and charity dwell in good work, and useful work is the simplest and most powerful method for personal spiritual growth. Swedenborg said simply and clearly, there is no happiness in life apart from activity, and Burnham agreed. In a letter to his wife Margaret, he wrote, work is the one thing that tells in this world, isn't it, dear? We both know the real good of it, do we not? Life, without it, life would be nothing. Burnham's city planning was his uses. Burnham would get no payment for his 3-year effort on the plan of Chicago. He did it as a service to the community. But it was not just Burnham's donation of his time. Burnham hoped that his city planning work would improve the lives of his fellow citizens. And from here out, these will be all images from the plan of Chicago, even though later I will be quoting not from the published plan, but from the manuscript draft of the plan. Burnham hoped that his city planning work would improve the lives of his fellow citizens. If we can see past the beauty of the rendered perspectives, we can hear Burnham's concern in the text. He declares, "The slum exists today because of the failure of the city to protect itself against gross evils and known perils. Chicago has not yet reached the point where it will be necessary for the municipality to provide at its own expense for the rehousing of persons, but unless the matter should be taken in hand at once, such a course will be required in common justice to men and women so degraded by long life in the slums that they have lost all power of caring for themselves." And here we have, Magritte's image of "this is not a pipe. What do you believe? The image that you see or the text that says it's not?" So here we're focusing on the lushness and beauty of the city typically shown in Burnham's renderings of the plan of Chicago. But when you read the text and when you read the draft, you're able to hear something else. However, in the published plan, we do see Burnham's concern in the few photographs of the neighborhood park field houses and the activities that they supported in the city's poorest neighborhoods. The manuscript draft of the plan argues more pervasively for Burnham's social concerns. This draft of roughly 300 pages was finished by 1908, and it includes a social agenda that was omitted from the final published version. Notable among the services that Burnham proposes in the draft is child care for working mothers. This is 1908. He sees it as urgently important and says, "It has intimately to do with the self-respect of great numbers of women, women who are willing to and do work and who cannot do it and take care of young children at the same time." Burnham argues that it is important to preserve the self-respect of these working citizens and help keep them from dependence, because despair and hopelessness in the citizen is a danger to the public. Throughout the draft, Burnham maintains the relationship between the individual and the larger community is an essential one, and that improvements in the individual condition will result in improvements to the larger society. In the draft, Burnham developed his argument about the importance of school playgrounds and the opportunities they give teachers to observe the social development of their charges. Similarly, neighborhood parks could benefit both adults and children by providing a place which would bring not only the children and youth, but the adults out into the open. They conduce to association, discussion, good manners, and moderation on the part of all. In short, they have a profound effect on good citizenship. There cannot be too many of these neighborhood parks. The more there are, the safer and sounder our democracy will grow, because they tend to cultivate those qualities which are the most important for a citizen to possess. Burnham argues that we are at our best when we are seen by others, and that the safety of the community is enhanced by keeping the activities of the citizens open to the public gaze. Burnham applied this idea to the police force as well. He concerned himself in the draft with the redesign of police stations so that, quote, "the policeman can do nothing to any prisoner while hidden from view." Here he argues it would be beneficial to good police service to open up the statements to observation because, he says, where men are hidden from public gaze, they do not exercise the same control over themselves as when their actions can be seen. Here, observation is intended to prevent the abuse of power by representatives of the state. By exposing all to public view, both the citizens and the authorities would be at their best in Burnham's city. Burnham envisioned a mutually advantageous relationship between the city and the citizen. a social ideal in which both society and the individual would benefit. Burnham's attitude can be summarized by his criticism of those who have made colossal fortunes as the result of undue advantage, and who use it, he says, in ways that increase the inequalities of life instead of mitigating them. Why would Burnham want to mitigate the inequalities of life? Because of his Swedenborgian religious beliefs. City planning was his uses. The design of the neighborhood park field houses was his being in uses. It was Burnham's contribution to the creation of a physical realm so as better to correspond with that of the heavenly, not only in configuration, but in goodness. Frank Sewell, a Swedenborgian minister and friend, wrote in Burnham's obituary about a trip he took to Chicago. Oh, I have one page, if I may, please. When guiding his visiting friend around the city, Burnham showed the most pleasure when Sewell expressed his appreciation of the finely conceived park district playgrounds and assembly halls, and of every provision for which had its aim the pleasure and the good of the whole citizenship, without any distinction between rich and poor. Sewell wrote that no one in his time but Burnham conceived on so large and grand a scale and in so main a human spirit of the function of the art of building as one of the great humanizing and edifying instrumentalities in human advancement. For Mr. Burnham was a builder of cities preeminently, and this in all the highest and spiritual meaning that can be attached to the term. The teachings of Swedenborg proffered a belief that if our surroundings exhibit spiritual order and manifest divine goodness, it will influence the world's inhabitants for the better. When people live according to the heavenly doctrine and the natural world more closely resembles the spiritual one, then the holy city, the New Jerusalem, will come to earth. Burnham endeavored to make this physical world more in accordance with that of the spiritual, both through uses and correspondence, by making himself useful and the world a better place. His professional work was a sacralizing of space, a way of bringing spiritual order to the socio-economic free-for-all of early 20th century Chicago. In the overall good design of the city, he saw the material expression of the spiritual. For Burnham, his plan of Chicago, his noble logical diagram, was both a map of heaven and his map to get there. Thank you. Sorry for running over.
Okay, so we have the third presenter, and I'm very glad that she made it. And while they are uploading her presentation, I want to introduce her as Ming Ho. She's teaching at the Catholic University of America, and she works at HOK. She graduated from Notre Dame with a master's degree, and the rest she will tell you a little bit more about herself. I just want to, while they're doing it, for you to pay attention about Stephen's work and presentation about the central paradise of the world, and Kristen's Burnham's Chicago's plan. And there is something common there. First of all, the way how spirituality makes influences on the city and urban designs. And second, about how they both were relating to the New Jerusalem, and how this heavenly city made such a profound influence all over the world, and in Chicago plan, London, and others. So. Are you ready?
Yes.
Good. Give her a hand. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, first apologize for being late. I'm glad I'm here. A little bit about myself first. My background always been architectural. I got my first master degree in Tsinghua University with a specialty in historic preservation. So I spent 3 years follow my mentors, go to those remote villages and towns, do tons of field management and historic preservation plan. And then after that, I got my second master degree from University of Notre Dame with a focus on Western or traditional urban design and architectural design. And then after that, I'm currently working in HOK full-time as a project designer and part-time teaching at the Catholic University. Currently, my specialty and my focus area is sustainable design, high-performance design, and energy modeling. And the course I'm teaching at the Catholic U is also environmental design. So having said this, some of you might be curious why such a big jump or leap? Why such a mixed background? You can ask me later, but I can tell you, for me, from my eyes, my perspective, I can see the clear connection from historic preservation, traditional architecture, and traditional urban design, and the sustainable design. And I can argue this forever. So
I join you.
thank you. And all of this is really coming from my background, something always interested me, fascinated me, and also this is the topic I'm going to discuss today. I hope I can share with you all I'm interested. The topic I'm interested in is the relationship between social, cultural sustainability and the built environment. So today what I'm going to discuss is the scholar of facial culture and its impact on traditional Chinese urban city-town planning. So first of all, who are a scholar of facial? It sounds really strange name, right? So scholar of facial had earned the academic degree by passing the rigorous imperial examination. And they have dominated the politics of traditional China from Sui dynasty until 1911. As a class, those scholars presented the morality and virtue. Although they received no official salary and were not government official, but their contribution and the cooperation were very much needed and respected by district magistration when they're talking about governing the local area. So those social scholar officials reserve Confucian, meanwhile also worship Buddhism and Taoism. Literati and the Taoist exchange were very frequent. During the course of development of traditional Chinese culture, Taoism has been impacted by those scholar officials. Some negative elements, such as witchcrafts, were gradually abandoned, and the positive ingredients, such as the pure character and assertion, has been integrated into the Taoist. At the same time, the scholar of facial culture and the philosophy of built environment was also influenced by the Taoism. The spiritual understanding of nature and the balance of nature and man-made environment has become the dominant principles when those scholar of facial class start planning a city or town or a village. Okay, this work. Something really dear to my heart. This is my hometown. The major reason for selecting Nanjing is that because the city epitomized the interaction between scholar of facial culture and the traditional urban development. Nanjing is a historic city which was constructed according to a set of Confucian philosophy and the Taoist methodology. The city claims a past due back to late 6th century BC. its urban growth and development, even till now, has been regarded as a physical continuation of this historic construction. So, therefore, the interaction between inhabitants of Nanjing city, no matter it's old or new city, and the existing urban environment provide a very appropriate context for our today's discussion. Okay. To illustrate one of the important concepts in Taoism and in the scholar of visual culture is the whole universe is one state, including living and dead. Mingxiao Mausoleum is the very appropriate sample. Mingxiao Mausoleum situated on the southern slope of Purple Mountain, and this mausoleum is a resting place for the first emperor Zhu Yuanzhang, who founded the Ming Dynasty. It dates back over 600 years and cover about area of 2,970 hectares. It embodies the ancient city planning principle and the settlement layout for the living and the dead shall join together peacefully, as well as represent the core principle of Taoist, natural and man-made world as one unity. The mausoleum itself is made of two major sections, the sacred way and the mausoleum itself. The sacred way is about 1,800 meters long and decorated by this type of stone carved animals all along the way. So this sacred way leads the people from the very active entrance located in the urban area and directly into the central area of mausoleum, which is embedded in the nature. And the mausoleum itself includes the gateway, the tablet hall, a pavilion, which composed of a man-made small pocket park in the natural surrounding. So you can understand the intricate relationship between man-made world in the natural surrounding and the natural surrounding actually within the bigger man-made environment. And the mausoleum's layout represents the typical scholar official's garden house design. It not only functions as a resting place for the dead emperor, and also it's played a key role in terms of providing vibrant public gathering, public sacred place for a lot of important civic events. The social order is a physical phenomenon which can be reflected in the spatial order of the physical elements. In traditional Chinese cities and vernacular Chinese house, the models of relationship and the social hierarchy upheld by the Confucianism can be read. On the urban scale, the Nanjing Old City layout has shown a mixture of central hierarchy culture and a local system. Located in the region with innumerable of roads, the Nanjing Old City followed the basic format of a gridiron road network, yet with modification to fit the small canal network to form a distinct dual network system. This dual network system composed of a regular pedestrian and a small canal way. The communal space, the streets in the old city. The communal spaces by the Confucian temple, which you see on the screen, never intends to constitute a Chinese version of those civic squares, civic plaza in Western world. It is concerned with the distinctive Chinese concept of communal space. The communal space in the traditional Chinese city concept should be pertaining to a certain kind of social institute. Typically, it's a school, a public school. So as to expand its existence and meaning. So behind this temple, actually, there is two institutions. One is public school, and the other is the formal examination place, hold the imperial examination for almost the entire country. So with this, the Confucian Temple as the central traditional communal space in Nanjing Old City has been a perfect example to explain this concept. The Confucian Temple is located in the southern part of Nanjing Old City, just like the Chenhuang Temple in Shanghai. Probably some of you already know. The Confucian Temple is also very busy traditional bazaar all through the ages, with shops and different activities going on all time, and attracting people from different walks of life. And you can see on your lower right corner, this is the people celebrating the Chinese New Year in the plaza, in the square, in front of the temple. And today, in today's Nanjing, the areas in proximity to the temple has become the central commercial district where locals and visitors would make it a destination for various purposes. So this is that was the first case sample. The second case is a Xingye village. It's a smaller scale. Choosing this Xingye village as the second case due to its authentic and unique integration and interpretation of how man-made built form can seamlessly blend it into the natural environment. The Xingye village is located in Nanxi River region. Nanxi River region is located in Yongjia County of Zhejiang Province in the southeast China. Yeah, southeast China. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its scenic landscape and a very unique scholar official culture imprints. At the end of Tang Dynasty, quite a few scholar official clans moved to Nanxi River region from the northern city due to the disappointment of political suppress and the value system clash with the imperial clans. So what they also brought the Confucian morality together with the essence of Taoist to this remote region at that time. The moral value and the belief in harmony with nature has been presented in the village layout and architectural language. The intellectual properties and the moral value of those scholar officials brought blended into the local vernacular agricultural culture, together form a very unique subculture under the Taoist, which we call the farming reading culture. In Xingye village, there are 16 ancestral hall altogether, and those are important place-making symbols and hierarchy organizers. Cluster of individual neighborhood are organized around those ancestral hall. And what you see, it's this ritual they do celebrate for different events. The villages can be divided into 3 neighborhood hierarchy levels. The main street from the first level, which connect all those 16 different ancestral halls together, and it reflects the scholar officials' strong belief in connecting with tradition and respecting the past. To penetrate the housing block from the main street, instant would generally lead people to a lane or alleyway that constitute the second level of the neighborhood. The third tier comes to the dwelling units, in which the courtyard is the common place. The smaller courtyard similar to this ancestral hall. The courtyard is the common place centered by a cluster of individual buildings that, on the other hand, turns out to be a personalized and a private extension of living quarter of those ancestral hall courtyard. The scholar official ideology encourages closeness to nature and promote the natural peace over the urban bustle. So the village dwelling scholars has created an illusion of the natural tranquility in small but deliberately designed the private garden, private yard in their courtyard house in the Xinye village. What you see here is the outside view, and this is a type of a typical architectural decoration and language they do. The private house, private garden created by the scholars, dwellers living in the Xinye village illustrate a long-standing aesthetic code derived from the Taoist thinking, which is the central to visual identity of traditional Chinese vernacular culture. The code embeds the people's preference towards their desirable environment, which is closely related to their cosmologic view and human-nature relationship. So this is the two case study, two samples I want to share with you. The conclusion, I don't have a definite conclusion, but some lessons I want to draw from here is in today's development, urban development in China, to sustain the historic continuity of traditional urban fabric, there is a tension. Of course, we all know from the fast-paced modernization, there's something missing in terms of intelligibility and intimacy to people, whether it's in China or elsewhere. In those standardized, modernized urban fabric, no matter it's in China or in other places, the missing elements can only be found from the traditional urban fabric and the principle which bring out those fabric. Those design principle has embedded and intricately relate to the cultural imprints. In China's case, it's Taoism, and in Southeast China's case, for example, Nanjing City or Xinye Village, there's scholar official cultural imprints. So what I'm trying to argue for is, even with the distinction of the scholar official class, those cultural imprints, those good urban design elements and the principles still can be continued, carried on to use in the modern city planning and design. Okay, thank you.
So thank you for the last presentation that ended a little bit earlier because we have some announcement. Lunch will be served starting at 11:30 because we need to be back at 12:30 for the next session because we have 4 presenters in the next session. So we have 15 minutes to ask 2 questions and to go to the other place for lunch. And so please, can the presenters be seated?
So where is she? Where is she?
Okay. You would like to have a question? Yes, I do.
Thank you for 3 excellent presentations. I do want to direct this comment to Kristen, and surprise. And I guess I want to make a proposition and ask if you are more or less in agreement with it, or if you find it problematic. In fact, I'll invite everybody to whether or not I'll ask whether others find it agreeable or problematic as well. But I thought that your talk was an excellent demonstration of Burnham and subsidiarity, right? That subsidiarity, that Burnham is generally criticized for focusing on the downtown business interests and not being concerned about neighborhood life. And obviously, as you demonstrated in your research, he was very much interested in neighborhood life as well. But it seems to me that in discussion of the Burnham plan historically, first of all, your research suggests that Burnham's classicism was congruent with his social concerns and not opposed to his social concerns, and that generally speaking, those two things have been placed in opposition to each other.
Right.
And so, what I want to suggest, and see if you agree with it or not, is that part of Burnham's interest in classicism was that it organized public space for the rich and the poor alike, and that this, he regarded this as an act of usefulness, if you will, and that what's significant about that is that this is in contrast to modern urbanism, right, which is generally anti-spatial, right? In other words, that modernist architecture and urbanism is less about using buildings to shape public space than they are about making object buildings in a kind of anti-spatial context. And so in that respect, Burnham's interest in a traditional spatial environment was part of his social justice concerns. And this is a spiritual thing, and somewhat in contrast to the tendency to think about social justice in terms material and utilitarian.
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Say just yes, because we don't have much time.
Yes. And the other thing I would say is that in classical architecture he found order and tradition, which was part of structuring the urban environment. And here it really needs to be said he was greatly influenced by Charles McKim of McKim, Mead and White, who explained a lot of not only the classical language to him, but also classical urbanism. And it's McKim who writes to Richard Morris Hunt when they're both working on the World's Fair, and he says to Hunt, you know, I've been to see the grounds, and your dome, the administrative building, the centerpiece is coming along beautifully, and my building is all I want it to be, the wall of the court. And that's the one clear indication I've found of McKim's urban sensibility, that understood that classical buildings were the walls of the spaces and did not necessarily need to express the structure that went on behind them. And so I think in that, McKim and his Quakerism is also in play here, and that's why they became so close, because they both had these substantial religious beliefs and thought that they were really doing good things for the public in their use of creating this kind of spatial order.
We have a place for one more question or comment. Here you go.
I just have a quick question for Wendy. First of all, compliments to all three on articulate presentations. When you talked about stepwells, I was particularly interested in your minor coverage of adalage. I wish I'd seen more of that, especially in the video. But one of the things that strikes me is that the structure, particularly at the top level of adalage, is very classical and is almost akin to Roman architecture, which was a little later. I don't mean Roman, I mean classical Renaissance architecture. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, first, a response to why so little coverage of adalage. And actually, this is a logistical and pragmatic thing. This is my very first visit to India ever, and therefore to the stepwells. And it was more of it's kind of a scouting trip than anything. I really didn't know what I would find. And there were very strict restrictions on the well-supervised wells of use of tripod. So some of the shaky video that you saw, particularly like at Abaneri, John Bowery, you know, the more famous step wells or the more well-preserved were the more restricted in terms of, you know, there were other more minor step wells. There was no one there. I could use whatever equipment I wanted. So it's sort of a pragmatic answer. Believe me, next time I will be going with my permissions all prearranged with the Archaeological Survey before I get there. In terms of your observations about the relationship, I mean, I'm not an architectural historian, so I really can't say. I'm not. I want to make it clear I'm not an expert on these matters, and the good news is that my understanding of documentary film is it's very important for the director not to be an expert. You want to interview the experts. You don't want to be the expert. So I will defer to others if anybody knows about it. Certainly, this struck me. I did see not only relationships in terms of the iconography, the columnar orders of some of the wells to Roman architecture, but also to Egyptian architecture. I saw many similarities. Personally, I was put in mind of those and Islamic architecture. So.
Okay, Julio convinced me that we have time for another question. So here we go.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
I do appreciate Daniel Barham's concern for community sensibility, and women, children's need, and all that. This is about what and how. I'm curious about how can you shed some light on the way he, I guess, involves the public? Do you know anything about the way he worked with the public, other people in his design and planning process?
For the neighborhood park field houses, he was commissioned mostly by the South Park District. So the South Park District was his client. And even in the other, I think he's done some work on the north side as well. So he's mostly working with the park districts. The person there that's really important is Frank Foster. And Frank Foster was the one who developed the idea of these assembly halls related to and integrally connected with the park. And these assembly halls had classrooms for learning English as a second language. They had well baby clinics. They had baths at a time when many people, especially on the south side, did not have running water. They functioned as community centers. So I think with regard to the park districts, the person who really worked with the community was this Frank Foster, who was the intermediary between the South Park District and the community. When it came to the larger city plans, Burnham was hired first by the Merchants Club and then by the Commercial Club. And this larger business group were the ones who commissioned the plan and oversaw its completion, which is why I think the social content was omitted from the published version. But having said that, elements of the plan went through public scrutiny, public hearings. There was a long debate, especially on what was called at the time the North-South Link Connection, which we know as Michigan Avenue, but it didn't used to go over the river to the north side, and that had a big public scrutiny for about a year before they undertook that, and that became then part of the plan.
Okay, I would like you to give a big hand to these wonderful three presenters. And bon appetit. We'll see you back at